Hi, and welcome to my capstone presentation on the effects of right-wing media on immigration policy, and asylum seekers. So first, a little bit about me. My name is Kirsten Shear, and I'm 22, and I graduated with my bachelor's degree in political science, focusing mainly on women and gender studies in December of 2022. Um, I knew higher education was something I wanted to pursue before I even began my undergraduate degree. It was just really a matter of finding a graduate program that focused on social justice, which is ultimately how I ended up at ASU Online. Social justice and human rights has always been an interest of mine since I was a kid. My mom would take me to pride parades and political rallies as a child. And in high school and throughout college, some of my friends and I attended political rallies and protests together, and then eventually went on to hosting some of our own. I grew this passion for correcting injustices and amplifying others' voices, which has led me to a career in higher education as a financial aid advisor at my alum. Working in financial aid as an advisor allows me to work in a fulfilling and rewarding job while also recognizing and empathizing with student circumstances and just current issues overall. My focus on social justice and human rights has always been immigration policy and reform, as well as LGBTQ plus homelessness and domestic violence against women. But in this presentation, I will focus mainly on immigration policy and reform. So my main argument and thesis statement is I will examine how right-wing media outlets portray immigration policy, and asylum seekers negatively, and that in turn makes individuals perceive immigration differently as a whole. So my first topic is to highlight right-wing media's influence on individual voters. My main question is does right-wing media negative portrayal of immigration policy and immigrants actually influence an individual voter's perspective? This is reflected, and yes, right-wing media does actually influence individual voters. And this can be seen in selective exposure to cable news and immigration in the United States, the relationship in between Fox News, CNN, and attitudes towards Mexican immigrants by Jill de Zuniga and Venezuela. The pair study how two different cable news channels, Fox News and CNN, both carry different political biases in their reporting, change the viewer's attitude about immigration and its policies. The pair theorize and then find that conservative Republicans are more likely to watch Fox News, pretty given, but which is associated with negative perceptions of Mexican immigrants and higher support for restrictive immigration policies and discriminatory acts. Findings also suggest that liberals who are exposed to Fox News show less support for Mexican immigration the longer that they consume and watch Fox News. And so not only does Fox News have the influence to influence individual voters, but it also can change voters' views. They're very persuasive. The research here provided accurately reflects and proves how just simply choosing which news article to watch in the morning or news channel to watch in the morning will drastically shift a person's attitude and beliefs about immigration and immigration policy. It also highlights the portrayal of political issues through a specific bias lens. Republican and conservative can alter how news is reported just in general. Misinformation is not only harmful to immigration sentiment and other various political and social issues, but it also has numerous implications on our society as a whole, which we can touch on a little bit later. But just a general overview, misinformation can cause, the weakening of our democracy and government systems. It undermines public discourse and it disrupts the overall practice of journalism itself. So now onto my next topic is, so now that we've established that right-wing media outlets portray immigration negatively and directly impact individuals' beliefs, we need to discuss the realities of immigration and immigration policy so that we can compare and see how right-wing media negative portrayal differs from real-life immigration stories and experiences. By examining the realities of immigration, including the difficulties, roadblocks, and legal processes, one can form a foundation of knowledge about immigration and recognize the false sentiments that right-wing media outlets and its viewers hold. Non-arrival measures, as well as the externalization and virtualization of borders, are all measures placed to deliberately make it more difficult for migrants and asylum seekers alike to immigrate and obtain access to rights in the United States of America. The legal process of migrating to the United States is far more tedious and debilitating than what is actually reported and depicted in right-wing media outlets. Additionally, by discussing the disregard for human life and rights at the border of the United States, you can determine that immigration and its policies are not being accurately depicted in right-wing media at all. This is seen in A Thousand Little Guantanamos, Western States, and Measures to Prevent the Arrival of Refugees by Matthew Gibney. Gibney highlights that Western states have slowly implemented non-arrival measures and deliberately made it more difficult for migrants and asylum seekers to immigrate and obtain access to rights in the United States. These non-arrival measures can be differentiated from other restrictive practices used in recent years by the fact that they aim directly to impede access to asylum. Not content with scaling back the rights of asylum seekers in the hope of deterring applications, states use through the use of visa regimes, carrier sanctions, and immigration pre-inspection have moved the bar of arrival foreigners who might claim protection. Gibney also discusses why the public has been tolerant and indifferent to these non-arrival measures and hinder immigration altogether. Gibney states that these practices have been subtly added to the nature of immigration control and that they've been hidden out of the view of domestic audiences, which is something that I can attest to because I knew a whole lot about immigration in undergraduate, but I never had learned anything about externalization and virtualization of borders. And so this shows how media outlets don't report everything that they should. Furthermore, right-wing media outlets also refer to illegal or undocumented immigration as the easy way out, since it would not be taking the time or financial means to wait for their documents or legal migration to be approved. However, the same outlets and consumers do not understand the considerable dangers and brutality of undocumented immigration, especially at the Mexico-United States border. In The Land of Open Graves, Living and Dying on the Migrant Trail by Jason DeLeon. DeLeon describes the violence of immigration, specifically regarding the surrounding desert of Arizona. DeLeon argues that the disregard for lives and undocumented people and the idea that dead bodies should act as a deterrent to future migrants is all a part of the federal government's border security plan to continually deter other people from crossing the border. De Leon also references Giorgio M. Agamben's, sorry, I always get that name wrong, theory of the state of exception, which is, quote, the process whereby sovereign authorities declare emergencies in order to suspend the legal protections afforded to individuals while simultaneously unleashing the power of the state on them, end quote. As the Saroyan Desert can be identified as one of these areas, the border control does not recognize border crossers' civil rights or liberties at this point. De Leon states that the sheer isolation of the desert, in addition to the state of exception it carries, allows the federal government to justify its cruel, extraordinary measures to control and exclude uncivilized non-citizens. Finally, discussing fake news, misinformation, and half-truths, and how fake news has evolved further from its meaning to continually reinforce itself. As I previously mentioned earlier, misinformation is not only harmful to immigration sentiment and other various political and social issues, but it also has its own various consequences on our society and population as well. It causes the weakening of our democracy and government systems, high levels of distrust in our government, low political participation, all while also undermining public discourse, disrupting the overall practice of journalism itself. So the big question is what can be done to ultimately negate the false narrative and anti-immigration sentiment that's been growing in our nation. And this is a really tricky question to answer because generally you would say increased proper education and the embracement of intersexuality would be the most reasonable and practical solutions. However, these solutions alone pose their own issues, especially for right-wing media consumers. Former President Donald Trump has encouraged his followers and others in the United States to identify fake news and dismiss the information altogether. Although beneficial and very important in theory, this is accelerated in a magnitude to deny even factual information in the name of identifying fake news, especially whenever this news comes from generally left-wing media outlets. It's grown so large that oftentimes right-wing media consumers will even deny credible sources with an unbiased lens that report accurate information when it discredits or disproves the information they have consumed from their own right-wing media outlets. This phenomenon has made it extremely difficult to properly educate and inform right-wing media consumers and has increased partisan polarity to the absolute extreme. Catherine states in her article, Misinformation in Action, fake news exposure is linked to lower trust in media, higher trust in government when the side is on your power. That the longstanding problem of political misinformation drew public attention in the aftermath of the 2016 United States presidential election. Scholars, journalists, and politicians expressed alarm that the spread of fake news could destabilize political institutions and delegitimize media organizations. She goes on to even state that public confidence in political institutions affects civil and electoral behavioral, and with distrustful citizens more likely to sit out an election or vote for a populist candidate. While in some cases, concerns about poor government may lead to citizen mobilization, high levels of cynicism and mistrust can cause people to withdraw from participating in politics altogether. Political participation has become increasingly important as young voters have slowly become more interested in political issues and are becoming more inclined to vote. Additionally, we know that political participation is important as it allows individuals to formulate and voice their own opinions while also becoming involved in their own communities. Catherine states that she has found evidence linking exposure to misinformation with a trust in mainstream media and the federal government. Attitudes towards those institutions can in turn affect how people find and evaluate information, who they believe, and how they act during extended circumstances, as well as how or if they even participate in the political process. All of this to say, right-wing media outlets portray immigration policy, and asylum seekers negatively, and that in turn makes individuals perceive immigration differently as a whole. Here are all of my works cited, and I really hope you enjoyed this presentation and my entire compendium as a whole. I really enjoyed the process of building my compendium, and I put in a lot of work into it, as well as choosing specific images that would portray emotional and inflict emotional experiences. And so I hope I succeeded in that. And I cannot express how much I've loved the social justice and human rights program here at ASU. Thank you so much.